All right, let's just dive right into this explainer and crack open what is honestly one of the most bizarre yet absolutely fascinating literary investigations you're ever going to see. We're going to track the rise and the dramatic fall of a total literary juggernaut, and we're doing it all through the lens of a missing piece of candy. So meet Inspector Shinrock and his trusty assistant Roddy. These animated animal detectives are the stars of a satirical series called Banalotopia, and they are on a very serious, highly unusual mission through the gritty streets of their animated world.
Now, you might be wondering, why on earth are animal detectives hunting for missing Brandy chocolates? Well, we're kind of framing this entire explainer as a mystery box. We're using their search for these missing Weinbraunbohnen, which is a specific type of German candy filled with alcohol, as our guiding clue. I know, it sounds completely absurd, but it's actually deeply rooted in real history.
Because if you look at what our detectives are investigating, those are real historical authors. These missing chocolates were allegedly consumed by post-World War II Germany's most elite, exclusive literary circle, known as Group 47. They were a massive institution, and this candy, it serves as our bizarre but honestly perfect metaphor for the whole thing.
As the show puts it so brilliantly, this satirical candy perfectly symbolizes the heavy, dual nature of the literature these authors were churning out. Think about it like this. You've got this sweet, totally socially acceptable outer shell of fiction, but hidden inside is a sharp, burning dose of political reality.
Okay, moving into Section 1, Trumer literature, or starting from zero. Let's look at how this literary powerhouse built itself up from the absolute rubble of World War II. Group 47 really evolved through 4 distinct phases. It kicked off in 1947 when Hans Werner Richter founded it, just to give young writers a much-needed platform. Then it shifted from an initial clear-cutting phase, moved into a poetry phase, hit this peak of just massive cultural influence, and then it abruptly ended in 1967. It's basically the classic arc of a movement that defined an entire generation.
You see, this early era was entirely defined by Kahlschlag, which means the absolute clear-cutting and purging of the German language. You can look at this, along with Truma literature, or rubble literature, as the foundational evidence in our case file. These authors were coming back from prisoner of war camps and destroyed cities, and they needed a totally fresh, uncorrupted start to build a democracy from the ground up. The language literally had to be cleansed before they felt they could even use it again.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Golden Age of 47. Let's unpack how this intimate little support group turned into the definitive authority on German literature. The heavy hitters of this group essentially became the literary national team of West Germany. I mean, we're talking about legends. You have Heinrich Böll, who took home the group's prize in 1951 for his post-war satire. Ingeborg Bachmann, an absolute master of poetry, who won in 1953. And of course, Günter Grass, who won in 1958 and would go on to write the masterpiece The Tin Drum. What's absolutely wild is that 2 of these authors, Böll and Grass, would eventually win the Nobel Prize in Literature. But, as they got more powerful, their intense, really heavy-handed, moralizing tone became a massive target for satire. They became so dominant in telling society exactly how to think about its dark past that they inevitably sparked a backlash. They essentially morphed right into the very establishment they had originally set out to critique. To really grasp how dominant they were, and honestly why people eventually pushed back, you have to understand their meeting rituals. They were brutal. Hans Werner Richter acted as the central director. Authors would have to read their unpublished manuscripts aloud to the room, and then came these immediate, razor-sharp critiques from the circle. The rules were strict, absolutely no fundamental debates allowed. And the craziest part, no replies or defenses were permitted by the author. None. You just had to sit there in the electric chair and take the heat. It was incredibly intimidating. And that sets the stage for Section 3, Rebellion at Princeton. Let's dive into the major plot twist of our explainer, where those strict rituals finally crack under the pressure. Just look at the stark contrast between 2 of their major international meetings. Over in Sigtuna, Sweden, in 1964, the mood was totally triumphant, full of euphoria and group unity. But fast forward just 2 years to their 1966 meeting in Princeton, USA, and it was a disaster. Deep political division over the Vietnam War started creeping in, and a massive internal rebellion basically began tearing the group apart. And then came the fatal blow. Picture this. It's 1966, and a young Austrian writer named Peter Handke stands up and calls their life's work completely silly and idiotic literature. I mean, wow. He broke every single rule. Instead of critiquing a specific text, he publicly trashed their entire writing style and insulted the critics themselves. He walked right into their most sacred ritual and just blew it up from the inside. Now, if you're thinking, okay, that's just some exaggerated literary legend, the proof is actually hiding in plain sight. Deep in the digital audio archives of the Princeton University German department, the real-life recordings of that exact 1966 meeting are preserved. Hanke's historic takedown, the precise moment the spell was broken forever, is just sitting right there for eternity. It's a pretty incredible piece of historical evidence. So let's wrap this up in Section 4, the end of an era. Let's see how our metaphorical Brandy chocolates vanished for good. Because their downfall wasn't just some overnight collapse, right? It was a step-by-step unraveling of a group that had simply outlived its original post-war purpose. First, you had Handke's internal artistic rebellion. Then, the increasing political polarization from the outside world in the late 1960s. And finally, the ultimate physical disruption in 1967. It all came to a head at their 1967 meeting at a venue called the Pulvermühle. Radicalized university students actually stormed the building. And they weren't there to politely listen either. They mockingly chanted, "Poets, poets, poets," right at the authors, completely dismissing them as totally irrelevant in a time that required urgent political action. That protest was effectively the death knell for the institution. The world had officially moved out of the literary salons and straight into the streets.
Bringing it all the way back to our initial mystery, consider this one solitary chocolate. The loss of Group 47 really meant the loss of that highly specific post-war literary generation. It was the loss of that bitter, heavy medicine wrapped up in sweetness that dictated exactly how a country processed its darkest history. Our animated animal detectives, they're searching for a remedy that society just doesn't manufacture anymore.
So, I'm going to leave you with this final, kind of provocative thought. Do we no longer need that hidden alcohol in the chocolate to endure the hard reality of everyday life? Did Group 47 disappear because we found new, much more direct ways to debate society out in the open? Or did it vanish simply because we lost our taste for their potent, uncompromising truth? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. It's been an absolutely fascinating dive, and I really hope it leaves you with something to chew on.